One of the most important things to recognize about Song of Songs is that it is in your Bible. And that means that God intends us to read it. He intends us to study it and to understand it. And the church throughout the generations has struggled a little bit with this. Very early in the history of Christian interpretation of Song of Songs, it was spiritualized. And so Song of Songs was read as this allegory between Christ and the church. It's about the love that Jesus has for his church. And so for centuries, Song of Songs was read as if there's not even a relationship between a husband and wife happening there. Or if it's recognized, it's glossed over very quickly and moved on to some spiritual interpretation. And part of what that did, or what that contributed to, was a misunderstanding of the way that God intends us to think about sex, to think about intimate relationships between husbands and wives. For centuries, the church taught that celibacy, that asceticism, that if you really want to honor God, then you renounce marriage. You go and you live a single life devoted to God. This is counter to the scriptures. And so as a result, we've missed out in the church on some of the gifts that God has for us. More recently, the pendulum has swung to the other end of the spectrum, and there are plenty of interpreters in the last 100 years who will read Song of Songs and they find sex everywhere. They find it in places where it's really not, and they find it in contexts that actually go against the word and the will of God. And so there's these two extremes when it comes to interpreting Song of Songs. And the right place to be is in the middle, where you begin with the words of Paul, who teaches that marriage itself is about Christ and the church. Every marriage. Your marriage is actually telling the story of Christ and his love for the church. And since every marriage is about the love that Christ has for the church, that means that Song of Songs also has something to say about God's love for his people. At the same time, it has a lot to say to a husband and a wife. The relationship that we see in Song of Songs is one in which physical intimacy is absolutely an integral part of the way that they relate to one another. It's important, it's blessed by God. One of the key verses in Song of Songs comes right near the center of this poem, where you hear this voice that's unidentified, and I think it's easiest to think of it actually as the voice of God, because it's the marriage night. Their marriage has just been consummated, and then here comes the voice of God saying, "Eat, friends, drink, be drunk on love." God is inviting husbands and wives to enjoy the gift that he's given them in one another in a way that's deep and profound and blessed by him. He's not turning his face away when they're together in their bed. God is inviting them instead to experience that union as a reflection of the kind of intimacy that he created us for in the Garden of Eden, and the kind of intimacy he intends us for on the last day when Jesus returns and we have no shame and nothing to hide and can finally be fully known and fully loved. That's his intent for us, and he makes it possible for us through Jesus. In marriage, he gives us a little foretaste, a glimpse of that we are meant to receive and to thank him for.